If you could live one day over again, which one would you choose? If you had just one moment that you could go back and revisit or live again, which one would you pick? The day your children were born, or the day you got married? Maybe the day that you won some big award, or maybe a day on vacation when you laid on a beach on a tropical sunny day. I found myself pondering that question last week as, in honor of Groundhog Day, I watched the movie Groundhog Day. If you haven't seen it, it's about a selfish, disaffected weatherman played by Bill Murray who is forced to live the same day over and over again until he finally learns the importance of other people and the value of relationships. The day he is fated to repeat is a cold and gray Groundhog Day in the western Pennsylvania town of Punxsutawney. For several years, he relives the same day with the same cold gray weather, eating in the same diner, and reintroducing himself to the same people who don't remember him from one day to the next. And no matter what he does, good or bad or indifferent, he always wakes up right back where he started, on Groundhog Day in Punxsutawney, PA. At one point, a frustrated Bill Murray says, I was in the Virgin Islands once. I met a girl, we ate lobster, we drank pina coladas. At sunset, we made out like teenagers. That was a pretty good day. Why couldn't I get that day over and over and over? Sometimes when we're rushing around trying to get the kids ready for school and running off to work, Mary will remark to me that our lives feel very much like Groundhog Day, the same day repeated over and over again. And I'm sure that some of you have had similar experiences. But there are days, as Bill Murray's character points out, that would be very much worth repeating, or at least worth having them last just a little bit longer. The desire to linger a little longer on a magical moment is pretty universal. Souvenirs and autographs and commemorative t-shirts are all ways that people try to capture a little piece of a special experience to take home with them. The photography industry in particular, has grown out of the desire to hold on to special moments long after they have passed into history. On the shelves in my office, there are lots of pictures of special moments that I'd revisit if I could. There's one of Harry and Will Gray just after Harry was born. There's a picture of Mary and I taken while we were still dating, sneaking up on one of our friends from behind. There's a picture of my three best friends and I from college, posing in our most manly of poses, full of the hopeful exuberance of youth. And there's a picture of Will Gray and I standing in the surf at sunset during his first ever trip to the beach. Moments like that are precious but fleeting, and as much as we'd like to make them last, we cannot. Each day is a progression of moments in work and play, and we with people that we love dearly and with people that, we maybe love a little less dearly. The difficult moments do seem to creep by slowly sometimes, while the good ones seem to fly by at breakneck speed. But make no mistake, each moment of our lives, whether good or bad, for better or for worse, will pass along into memory. The band Kansas captured the essence of that truth in the lyrics to their 1977 hit, Dust in the Wind. I close my eyes only for a moment, and the moment's gone. The disciples in this morning's New Testament passage wanted to make the moment last. Finding themselves atop a mountain with Jesus, Peter, James, and John were amazed by the events that took place there. A cloud descended, Moses and Elijah appeared and spoke at length with Jesus, and the very voice of God spoke forth, proclaiming that this man, Jesus, whom the disciples had known and traveled with, whom they'd eaten with and laughed with and lived with for months, that this man was God's Son. It would have been a remarkable moment in time for any of us, but especially for Peter, James, and John. Born and raised within the Hebrew tradition, they would have been familiar with the stories about Moses ascending Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments from God. So when the cloud descended, they would have remembered the words of Exodus 34, which said that the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with Moses there. And when the appearance of Jesus' face changed and his clothes became dazzling white, they would have remembered that after Moses came down with the Ten Commandments, that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. And when they saw Elijah, the disciples would have remembered the tradition that Elijah would return just before the Messiah came. They would have been amazed to hear the voice of God. And God's pronouncement, combined with the presence of Elijah, would have made clear to the disciples that Jesus was the long-expected Messiah. The entire experience on the mountaintop was rich with meaning for those who experienced it. So it is understandable when Peter suggests to Jesus that they build some dwellings and stick around just a little bit longer. This was Peter, James, and John's perfect moment, and they wanted it to last. But Jesus declines and calls the disciples back down the mountain where real life comes crashing in. As the mountaintop was shrouded in a heavenly cloud, the valley is filled with the mundane sights and sounds and smells of everyday life. As the mountaintop featured the angelic visitations of Moses and Elijah, the valley is visited by the lowly masses of everyday people going about their everyday business. As the mountaintop rings with the voice of God, the valley drones with the murmur of idle chatter and the sounds of work and daily life. Though they long to stay in the presence of the holy mystery on the mountaintop, Jesus drags them down into the banality of life in the valley. And when they arrive, they are greeted almost immediately by the harsh reality of that existence. The man they find there is a father who Luke tells us is desperate because his son is tormented by a spirit who seizes him and convulses him until he foams at the mouth. It mauls him and will scarcely leave him. Now, even though Luke identifies this as a spirit or a demon, most modern scholars recognize here the symptoms of an epileptic seizure. And as a father whose sons have both struggled with seizures, I can tell you that I've never felt so helpless as when I held my own child in my arms, unable to do anything except comfort and reassure him and pray for the seizure to pass. I thank God every day for medicines and for doctors and for researchers who strive to understand and unlock the mysteries of the human body. So when Luke tells us that this father was desperate, I think I understand. And anyone who has ever been a parent, who has ever loved or cared for a child, can understand. Jesus reaches out and casts the demon out and makes the child well, and we see demonstrated in the valley the profound truth of the words that God spoke on the mountaintop, that this is the Son of God. Now, Luke connects these two stories together because, as Sharon Ringy notes, the glory of God's presence and the pain of a broken world cannot be separated. Luke underscores that while the change within Jesus that the disciples witness is important, it is only important in that it illuminates and empowers the transfiguration of all creation that God is accomplishing in and through Jesus. Lori Brandt Hale writes that living high up in the rarefied air isn't the point of transfiguration. It was never meant as a private experience of spirituality removed from the public square. It was a vision to carry us down, a glimpse of unimagined possibility at ground level. You see, as much as the disciples wanted to stay up on the mountaintop, to preserve that moment forever, Jesus knew that moment was merely a revelation which would bring them to the next moment, which was the moment where they needed to be. And this is true of you and I. Each time we come to encounter the holy is for us but prelude to what comes next. Our encounters with the sacred are not the end goal of our lives of discipleship, but are rather the brief interludes that recharge us to go out into the world where God calls us to be. The life of the disciple is not an invitation to sit on the mountaintop and enjoy the view. It's a call to go down in the valley and get your hands dirty. Leo Tolstoy, the author of War and Peace and Anna Karenina, also wrote a short story entitled The Three Questions. In it, a king searches for the answers to these three questions. When is the right time? Who is the most important person? What is the most important thing to do? He sought the answers to these questions, as people so often do, in order to secure his own success and comfort. But after much seeking and life experience, the king comes to the realization that, in Tolstoy's own words, there is only one time that is important: now. It is the most important time because it is the only time when we have any power. The most necessary man is he with whom you are, for no man knows whether he will ever have dealings with anyone else. And the most important affair is to do him good, because for that purpose alone was man sent into this life. The most important time is now. The most important person is the person you are with, and the most important thing is to do good by that person. And that is the message at the core of this transfiguration story. While the disciples would like to stay in that place of heavenly mystery in the physical presence of God, Jesus pushes them back out into the world where they will live and serve, and not just enjoy the presence of God, but embody the presence of God to others. Now, I've only been here in this church for 4 months. Friday was actually the 4-month anniversary of my first day in the office here. So after only 4 months, I can honestly say that I don't know everything there is to know about this church and about this congregation. But in my time here, I've gotten a sense of comfort. This is a lovely place with very nice, caring people, but I fear that as a church, we have grown comfortable where we are. That as a church, we may have stayed too long in this safe place. And now it's time to figure out what transfiguration means for us. Now it's time to venture down from the mountaintop and find what God is calling us to do next. As we envision the future of Overbrook Church, where do you believe God is leading us next? Your mission committee is asking for your prayerful input as to where we should be directing our mission efforts, and I sincerely hope that you will take the time to pray about this and participate in their online survey. Our membership committee is prayerfully considering ways in which they are being called to embrace the task of evangelism, and I hope that some of you will feel called to join them in the effort. Tonight, we'll feed over 250 people at the YWCA Family Center, and thanks be to God, we have enough food and enough volunteers, but tonight is not the only time that a meal is needed down at the Y, and the Y is not even the only feeding ministry in this community. Where else might God be calling us to respond to Jesus' invitation to feed my sheep? And what about campus ministry at Ohio State? Estimates are that there are over 800 Presbyterian students down at OSU, and that's a lot more Presbyterians than are in this congregation. But there's no Presbyterian campus minister to guide that flock. And what of Christian education here at Overbrook? Right now we have 3 custodians and 2 pastors, but no educator. Could God be calling us to a renewed emphasis on Christian education? Might such an emphasis help us to grow into the church that God is calling us to be? There's so many questions, so many possibilities, and it's exciting to think about. But with every step of our journey, there also exists dangers and pitfalls. So maybe it'd be better to just stay still here in this comfortable spot for a little while longer. It is a good place after all. It is warm and it is friendly, and the Spirit of God is in this place. Maybe we could stay just a little longer. Or maybe it's time to follow Jesus down into the valley. To God be all honor, glory, power, and dominion in this world and in the world that is to come. Amen.